All around me was smoke and heat and scorched grass. Hovering 20 feet above it was Ardov, looking triumphant. How many times was this guy going to show up at inconvenient moments? A Rarl from the same planet as Tamred and Volonic, he had the good looks of a guy from a cat alien boy band and the smug attitude of a thug who believed he was untouchable. He'd tormented us after our first visit to Confederation Central, but back then, he'd been little more than a particularly tough and nasty bully. When we had returned to the station, he'd become Junip's henchman, ready to follow any order, including killing us. Fortunately, we'd been able to prevent that, but I still felt like we owed him some payback. "You've learned a few new tricks," Ardov said. "Something you picked up at the Hidden Fortress?" Those concerns I'd had about not wanting to kill my attacker were swirling down the drain. I raised my hand and projected a stream of metal-eating nanites on his hoverboard. He saw the blast coming and leapt off, somersaulting in the air and landing safely on the ground. Junip had illegally maxed out Ardov's Confederation skill tree, and that made him like Captain America. I, on the other hand, had the former skills that made me like Superman. I didn't even care that I was mixing Marvel and DC. I was going to kick his butt from one continuity to the next, and there was nothing he could do about it. His hoverboard was gone, and it was now a fight, plain and simple. He was sure he had the advantage in a straight-up brawl, but he was in for a nasty surprise. Alice was on her feet, looking battered but not seriously hurt. Her hair was a wild mess of tangles and twigs, her glasses crooked on her face but still intact. Did she even need them with her upgrades? I'd have to ask her that later.
"Zeke, forget him," she called to me. "He can't hurt us. You need to grab Volonic and get out of here."
"You're still pathetically trying to make everything in the universe work out just right," Ardov said to me, planting his feet like he was ready for me to charge him. "Don't you get it? Even if you were to get everything you wanted, then what? You bring Tamred back here, where she'd be a bigger freak than she is on Rarl? How do you think your fellow humans will take to having an alien criminal living among them? No matter what you do, you'll still end up miserable. I get a certain satisfaction out of that." I was about to launch myself at him, but Alice blasted me with another communication, this time through my HUD. The words, "Go, I'll cover you," appeared before me in gigantic glowing letters. She was right. It would have been nice to deliver a super-powered punch to Ardov, sending him flying over the tops of trees. I knew he could survive it, and I had no doubt that the memory would keep me happy for years to come. Even so, I turned away. I had just risked my own skin, and Volonic's too, I supposed, because I'd let Ardov get to me. Escaping from Earth was our priority. Maybe I'd get a chance to humiliate Ardov in the future. Hopefully, I'd never have to face him again, though. Making sure he was on the losing side would be revenge enough, I decided. The most important thing was getting everyone out of here. I turned to help Volonic up, but my HUD detected another incoming weapon. I raised my new shield, but this wasn't an energy attack, it was a physical weapon. A projectile, like a bullet, though the readings I was getting made it clear it was something much more advanced. I realized too late that the defenses we had might not be good enough. The projectile was partially phased, cycling rapidly from energy to matter and back again, and it pierced through the shields as though they weren't even there, and hit Alice in the shoulder. She spun around and hit the ground, rolling as the momentum of the blow knocked her across the blackened grass.
"I'm okay,"
she messaged me almost instantly.
"It's not serious. You need to move."
Even with just the Confederation skill tree, a bullet wound to the shoulder would mean nothing. The nanites would already be working to expel the bullet and repair any damage. Nothing short of a direct hit to the brain or heart would be deadly. I tried to suppress the rage coursing through me. He'd shot my friend. Someone I cared about. Maybe he was trying to goad me into a fight. I had to find the will to resist taking the bait. I would have to, if it weren't for the readings that I was getting from Alice. My scan showed me that her wound wasn't healing. The damage to her cells was spreading, defying the ability of the nanites to repair the damage. That was bad enough, but there was more. Whatever Ardov had shot her with, it was transmitting data somewhere, cutting through our communication blackout. When they'd had Tamred in their lab, she had been able to conceal her nanites to keep the Fads from finding out how they worked. Now, they had devised another way to try and get the information. They'd had to hurt Alice to do it, but I had a feeling both Ardov and Nora Price were perfectly fine with that. While I'd been showing off, reveling in what I could do, the Fads had been using the time to figure out how to study our abilities. If I was right, they were getting detailed information on how we had hacked the former tech tree. Alice was hurt, maybe dying, and the Fads were learning everything they needed to know in order to eliminate our advantage. There was one person who could tell me what I needed to know to stop all of this, and he just happened to be the being I hated most in the galaxy. Or maybe second most. Definitely top 3. It was between Ardov, Junip, and Nora Price for sure. I stopped worrying about the rank and charged him. There was nothing Ardov could do about it. He grinned when he first saw me coming, but then he noticed my speed. He might have observed that I was glowing and that fire was shooting down my legs and away from me like rocket exhaust. I was creating these effects intentionally. While they didn't actually make me any more dangerous, they looked menacing, and I figured that I had to intimidate him. If he wanted to mess with me, he was going to see what he was up against. He not only held his ground, but he charged me. He was slow by my standards, but he shifted from a tackling stance to something more aggressive, and he took me by surprise. He swung at me, and while I managed to avoid the full impact of the punch, his fist clipped my nose, which sprayed an alarming amount of blood. I expected Ardov to press the attack, but instead he rushed past me. He had my blood on his hands, and he was wiping it on a piece of cloth, which he deposited in a plastic bag, and then placed in his pocket. Having finished this bizarre process, he turned to face me again. My nanites were already healing my nose. There was nothing left of the damage now but some drying blood. It wasn't what he had done to me, but to Alice that fueled my rage. I charged him again, more quickly this time, and grabbed him before he could evade me. I was done messing around, and operating purely on instinct. I created a localized gravity dampening field, the sort of technology I'd been examining when I'd proposed making the van fly. I pressed my feet against the earth and shot into the air. I really was a superhero now. It would have been so amazingly cool if my friend wasn't lying on the ground below me, possibly dying, while nanites in her body recorded and transmitted data that would doom the Earth and the galaxy to tyranny. "What did you do to her, and how do I stop it?" I asked. I asked Ardov about when we hit 3,000 feet. "Maybe I misjudged you," he said. "Have you lost interest in Tamrad already? The novelty of another species worn off?" "Tell me what you did to Alice," I demanded. If he was afraid, he hid it well. "I'll never tell you anything," he said with a sneer. "Then you're no good to me," I told him, and so saying, I let him drop. Watching a guy you really hate, who has bullied you, hurt your friends, and become a foot soldier for an evil emperor's war, fall 1,000 feet, screaming, limbs flailing, is very satisfying. It's an experience every decent person should have. I was in no mood to enjoy it, though. The clock was ticking. I cut the anti-gravity effects and dove down, plucking Ardov out of the air, and then directed my energy field to stabilize his skeletal structure from the sudden halt in velocity. I needed him alive, and I couldn't afford him going the way of Gwen Stacy. "Let's try this again," I said. "How do I stop what you did to her?" He laughed at me. I was flying him hundreds of feet above the ground. I just let him fall almost to his death, and he thought it was funny. This guy didn't lose his cool easily. "You showed me that you care about the human girl more than Tamred. Better yet, you showed me you won't kill me. I know all your weaknesses. Why should I tell you anything?" It was a good question. I had to think about it for a second. "Because I can pull your arm right off your body. You'll heal in seconds, and you won't die, but the arm won't be coming back. And keep in mind, you've got 4 limbs. Maybe you won't tell me what I want to know after the first arm, but you will after I go for the second one. You've got 3 seconds to decide." Then I saw what I was looking for. Fear. He needed to be important, vital, active. I'd come up with a way to get what I wanted without risking his death. I could keep him alive, but hurt him enough that he would be useless to Junip, and he seemed to fear that more than death. Was I actually going to tear off his arm? I have no idea, but Alice didn't look good, and the data was flowing fast. Hesitating wasn't an option. I was distracted by a ping from Tamrat.
Forget him. We need to get out of here. Once we hit tunnel, the data stream will cut off.
That was a good point. There was no way to transmit data across the vast distances of space, only physical objects. Smacking Ardov around had been satisfying, but maybe a waste of time. There was still the matter of Alice's health, but he could tell us about that on the way. As much as I hated the idea, Ardov was coming with us. Get Alice to the ship, I sent back. I'm coming in, and I'm bringing a prisoner. I touched Ardov's neck and injected him with a sleeping agent. I then turned towards the ship and began zooming towards it. I hadn't been thinking clearly. I'd allowed my hatred for Ardov to cloud my judgment, and I'd been lured into making what was pretty clear a tactical error. We'd lost time, maybe for Alice and maybe for all of us, and I hoped that I hadn't just handed Ardov his biggest victory over me yet. I flew towards the ship, the air stinging my eyes. Maybe there were some tears of rage and frustration there too. I'd been an idiot. I'd put it all on the line so I could show off, so I could make Ardov see I wasn't a victim. Then, suddenly, I was no longer thinking about my mistakes, because I wasn't flying. I'd lost the ability to control my flight. My HUD was offline, and I was looking through normal, human eyes. With no warning, I'd gone from being a superhero to a guy who just happened to be 1,000 feet in the air, gripping a cat alien that he hated. And we were both tumbling towards the ground.